Their seminar booking ratio that year went from 42% to 72%. That's a huge growth. Their primary change was their personal story. It was not just hearing Bo Eason one time and saying, that's a good idea, I should share a story. Or not just getting into Pat Quinn stuff that's on the DVR and listening to it one time. It was really, really committing to it. Hiring personal coaches in there, even to the point of Tony's working with personal coaches before he goes onto our stage to hear his personal stories, to hear how he's crafting the presentation, like really, really committing to this. And so, again, his primary change was his opening story, working with getting very vulnerable and sharing that opening story, and then one or two other times sharing stories in there. And he swears that that was the biggest change inside of their office of going from 42% to 72%.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners.
Welcome to the Business of Advice podcast. Today we are doing something a little different. You may have heard me mention for the next 100 episodes, we wanted to add some new things that would add more value to all of you. One of the ideas we had was to do recaps from the incredible live events that we host throughout the year with some of our top advisors. So today we are going to recap our recent AE Exchange events. And to help me do that, I have a few special guests here with me that you will see. I'm excited to welcome back my co-founder, David Callanan. Dave and I did episodes 100, 101, and 102 together. And that was actually kind of the idea for these, is I've got a lot of great feedback on those. And then our Chief Strategy Officer, Matt Newman, and our President of Advisor Development, Jay Klima. So, guys, excited to have you on for the Business of Advice podcast. So
excited to join.
Let's do it.
So maybe a little background on what we want to do today. For those of you, specifically advisors who have been around here for a while, you know that one of the cornerstones to how we serve you is we surround you with successful people. And these AE Exchange events were no different. We had 5 of these events around the country, all held at one of our top advisors' offices, which that alone, I think you guys would probably say for the advisors in the group, getting to go see, touch, and feel the advisor's office was a really cool setup there. But we took a few days and really did a deep dive into the advisors' practices, their office, their staff, and just the exchange of ideas there truly made these a can't-miss event. However, we had 5 of them, so we all divided up. I actually made it to 2 of them. You guys were each at 1, I know for sure. But our advisors weren't able to attend each event. So we wanted to make sure everyone got value from these. So we're going to hit on the top learnings or takeaways that we each had from each one of these events. Those can't miss big ideas, ahas that will really help you serve your clients and do a better job helping them prepare for an amazing retirement. So Dave, I don't know, why don't we start with you since you're on the left. You were with one of our longtime partners, Rob, up in Dayton, Ohio. What stood out to you about your time with Rob, and what were some of your big takeaways from your time there?
You know, I tried to boil it down to, knowing that we'd be here, kind of talking about 5 things. I really focused on kind of boiling it down to 1. And in preparation, actually, for our recent Banff trip, which I thought was fabulous with all the advisors. For those of you that haven't been there, I think I coined it was a postcard out of every window. It is truly one of the most beautiful places you'll ever visit. I did a presentation, and actually I dug into this exact topic. But, you know, to set it up, I'd been doing some listening online. I believe it was the Founders Podcast, I believe is what picked it up, but it could have been another one of the things I listened to. And I heard the story of Todd Graves, who most people don't talk about very much. He started a little business I'll mention in just a minute. Actually, 30 years ago, he wrote a paper at LSU profiling this business concept. It was actually, he said he had a chicken finger dream. And he wrote this out. That paper received a C+ at his local university there at LSU. But 30 years later, that guy still owns 90% of Cane's Chicken, and he's worth $17 billion. You know, my wife, when I told her this story, she had a pretty good joke. She said, "That's clucking rich." And I think that's really true when you really think about it. So, but, you know, I took away a few lessons, and there was one that applied to what I took away from Rob's business. You know, over that 30 years, Cane's Chicken has had the same menu. They've been serving chicken fingers, French fries, coleslaw, and toast. And a few years ago, they finally threw such a big fit to Todd that they wanted a chicken sandwich. And he said, "Fine, 2 pieces of bread and 3 chicken fingers." And he stuck to that game, but what he shared over the process was he got really caught up in the details. It wasn't about changing things. It wasn't about a bunch of new things. It wasn't about innovation. It was about excellence in every single thing around a straightforward, simple concept. And that really got me focused on what our advisors do. When you really think about what they're doing in this business is, we're providing, for most of them, we're providing a wheel of value. We're providing income, we're providing estate planning, we're providing tax benefits, we're providing long-term care protection, we're providing 5 or 6 core things over and over and over consistently. But the question I wanted to ask everybody, or challenge everybody, which Rob and his team did a masterful job, that if you're really going to offer that wheel of those 5 things, very similar to Cane's Chicken offering a chicken finger dream, you should look at every detail around executing those to execute it unbelievably well. Now, I don't know on the podcast if they can actually show a screenshot of one thing, but if they can, it's possible. If not, that's fine. I'll do the best I can. He took
We
one.
kind of put them on the spot if they can. So,
Well, that's their problem. It's fine.
No pressure, Clayton.
They'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
But you know what? He shared one of them, and I've got it laying here in front of me, and it was focused around kind of the 5 senses of an office experience. And he broke it down into 5 parts. The visual appearance. One of the examples we saw in Rob Russell's office is you will find multiple examples on the wall that drive their mission forward. In each one of their conference rooms, they're named to a local celebrity or his father, who was the founder of the company. The visual appeal in all of those things is to drive the brand home. The next thing he talked about was kind of the acoustics, something I never would have thought about in business is, in every room, he went in and listened to the HVAC. Is it loud? Is it distracting to the meeting? These people are going to make a life-changing decision, and it shouldn't be distracted by the noise that comes in and out of that from an acoustic standpoint. He talked about scent and air quality. People want to walk into someplace that's refreshing. They actually have Russell Total Wealth scent, and that scent is run through their offices, pumped through their offices, and then to be clear, they have candles, which make a unique deliverable for people to take home. Physical. I thought a cool thing is, are your chairs comfortable? Are your tables and chairs unique in your organization? I mean, even down to the level of, which made me kind of laugh, is your toilet paper Charmin or the commercial crap that's uncomfortable? Every single detail should be physically comfortable. And then finally, your culinary culture. Do you have the beverage menus? And one thing I caught in his office that I thought was kind of cool, I actually nabbed one or 2 when I came home, was he actually has dog treats. It says many people like their dogs more than they like their kids, and so why would you not serve them when they go home? My point of all that is those 5 areas, visual appeal, acoustic, scent, air quality, physical, culture, and then ultimately your culinary experience, is an example of thinking through every single detail to make it sure it matches your brand and what you're trying to achieve. Taking that one step further and to kind of bundle this thing up, Cody, and kind of to be real is, inside of these businesses, I think that's one area you could focus on. But I think when you think about the businesses we all run, you could have everything from your office environment, to your seminar experience, to your client communication, to your prospect communication, to your client segmentation experience, to your sales process, to your client events, that could all have similar detail grids put in place. And if you get those 6 to 7 areas locked in, you've now created the ultimate customer experience. Going back to the first, at Cane's Chicken, from his perspective, they have created the ultimate customer experience when it comes to creating a fast chicken finger dream. I think our advisors can do exactly the same thing.
Let me ask a couple questions there. Anything, one, I think, one of the things I should have said at the beginning is we always say success leaves clues, right? And these are 5 of our top advisors bringing in. I don't know that there's an advisor that isn't bringing in over $200 million a year in new assets of these 5 that we all went and saw. And they all have great offices, right? It's one of those things I always say, upgrade your office, business will grow. But were there any unique things you saw there? Because we've all been to a lot of advisor offices. Just anything in Rob's that jumped out that just hey, everyone should know, here's 3 things I saw or 2 things I saw that were just different than I've seen in other offices or unique?
I think when he built this building from ground up, one of the unique things he did there was he put his firm upstairs and then has downstairs offices where he was able to insert things that matter to his clients. Tax planning, estate planning, and frankly for his wellness. There's health there. So I thought that was very differentiated when you go into a facility like that. Second thing.
Kind of had a vision like one-stop shop, right? Like you can come here and everything's under a roof, even if he doesn't own it all per se.
Absolutely. On top of that, they just installed a VIP lounge where if you're one of his top clients, they've got like a upfront experience where you go into that separate lounge when they come in. It's got kind of the bourbon counters and the wine lockers and all of those things. You actually used to be his recording studio, and he converted it to, instead of being a recording studio, it's a VIP client experience, which I actually think is cooler.
Cool. Yeah.
Too often it's about you and your brand and your radio thing. Instead, it becomes about the clients, which I found to be really, really, really sharp.
I mean, think about that. You know, if someone flies first class, you get the different experience, right? The lounge, all those things. That'd be a easy one for anyone if you have some space that you're not using or using well to convert there. And then how does he make sure, and I know Rob does it well, right? So, but did he talk through it all, how he makes sure that those points are, like, maybe said a different way, how does he emphasize this with his team and make sure they execute on these details matter?
You know, he talked a lot about the individual training of it. I think the organizational leader, it has to be a culture of the titles that you're going to call things, the way you're going to speak to people, and the way you're going to lead day to day. It was really, really cool to watch when we went in the office and the tours were done. They were done by the teammates that own those divisions, and they know the stories that they're supposed to tell. They know the brand that they've created. I think too often, I think we think about coming up with cool ideas, but execution comes in repetition. And you could just tell every single thing was repeated in that office about what this culture is, how it will work, what you will do, and what it looks like from the operator or director of first impressions all the way through the top salespeople.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I think too, you know, the point I'd make there, just knowing Rob and calling him a good friend for a long time, is like, it does start at the top, right? Rob pays attention to details. And I'm not saying this, but like, you can't set this expectation, then come in dressed like a slob every day and expect like that not to trickle down, right? Like Rob looks the part, shows up, ready to play. So that's good. Jake, this move to you, just kind of keep this moving along, I guess. So you got hit Fort Lauderdale, so rough spot to be, and you know,
it could be worse.
In the mayor whenever we were there. But you were with Grant and Andrew, someone that you worked with them for a long time. Part of the reason that you went down there, but maybe just walk through some of your key takeaways from your time with them.
Sure. I was going to share 4 things. 3 of them are really tactical. The one to open up with is maybe kind of a surprise on how they open. So M&A is a big part of our industry right now, and you know, it's really cool to see people get close to retirement and sell their businesses and get to celebrate that with them. Andrew and Grant are younger guys, and they opened up with a real open story about how they almost sold back in 2022. And Andrew shared the story that they were at the finish line within 24, 48 hours of closing the deal, not accepting an offer, closing the deal. And he said, you know, they got a call that the deal was off. And so him and Grant texted each other. He went to bed that night, and he woke up the next morning, and he used the word, he goes, I wasn't sad at all. I was actually relieved. And he went on to say, you know, this had been our whole lives, our whole purpose, and we almost had all of that leave. And then he shared that over the last couple of years, by focusing, they found their purpose, but they've also had big growth. And I wrote these numbers down. So 2022, the year they almost sold, 100 million. 23, they did 150 after getting refocused. 24, 185. And then this year, to your point, north of 200 million, they're on pace to do 240 million in 2025. So I thought it was super cool to hear someone get re-engaged and really find that purpose going forward.
Well, one of the things I actually was down there and saw Grant right after that all happened. I remember where he was giving me a ride to the hotel, and he said that he's like, I didn't realize how big of a distraction this has been for the last few years too, right? Our mind's just been so focused on that. We haven't been focused on the business. So yeah, that's good. Okay. Other points. So didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, great question. Great point. So the second thing, what I love, sales leadership, and they had been struggling to build a sales team for quite some time. And they really put a lot of focus into this. And they did it through a couple different models, but one that Andrew shared on stage, they had been coached a lot to do one basic thing, which was to host regular sales team meetings. And I know one thing that you guys have shared before at sales leadership stuff is one of the mistakes that you and Dave believe you made is by not spending time with your sales team. And Andrew shared the same thing. And so what they implemented was called Mega Monday meetings. And this sounds like a lot, and it is. It's 4 hours every single Monday. And it's required, even the remote ones that are at different branch locations, those remote advisors have to come in. And they're covering 3 basic things. So they're covering review cases. So Andrew shared a case that he closed earlier that week, and he was going to share how he overcame objections, how he did the planning, and how he drove that home with the client and how they eventually brought them on board. But then they're also going to retrain on one section of the sales process. So they're using the Sandler Selling System sales process. They're going to walk through, for example, the upfront contract and retrain on that and retrain on one piece every single week. And then the other big thing, which I know we're big believers in as well, they have scoreboards. And it'd be really cool if Clayton can throw up their scoreboard in their office because they don't overdo it. It's a whiteboard in their sales leader's office. And like our belief is, we think we can solve about 90% of problems on a sales team through one thing, which is having scoreboards. And they were tracking, yes, lagging indicators like production and closing ratio, but also leading indicators. And some of the big ones for them that'll lead into another one of my points is the closing rate at seminar or appointment setting at seminar, and then the first appointment stick rate after a seminar. And so I wanted to wrap this section with a story. John, their CIO, who still actually meets with clients, I've known him for a long time. He came up to me as we were looking at the whiteboard. He goes, Jake, I didn't believe in this stuff, and I didn't want to do it at first. But when I saw myself at the bottom of a couple of these, I was darn motivated to get the top of it. So it was super cool to hear him say that directly and to see his name climbing that leaderboard.
That's cool. Well, I think as you build out an agency, right, and you have more advisors, like we say that a lot. It was I'll talk about Ryan and Tyson's a little here at the end, but same thing they said is like you have to. We didn't think about the fact that we're now leading a sales organization, right? You're making that transition from a salesperson to a sales leader, so that's good. Okay, what's third?
Third one, this will be a little bit shorter, and it's along the same lines of training the team, but Andrew and Grant, big football guys, both big football guys, and they use the metaphor of watching game film. And so one big why that they've been trying to overcome was they wanted to have their sales advisors start doing seminars with the success that Andrew and Grant were doing them. And so by success, I mean appointment setting ratio and sticker ratio, the first one. And at first they were just training them and sending them out. But now to watch game film, what they do, each marketing director that's attending the seminar events, no matter who's doing them, they're usually doing about 4 to 6 of them a week. The marketing directors all have the same kit they take with them. And that kit is a bag that has a tripod in it, has a camera in it, and a microphone. And they record every single seminar, no matter who's doing it. But then to put the kind of rubber meets the road type deal, when they get back that next week, they watch it. And so Grant, their other sales leaders they're watching it and then doing a voiceover of, hey, Johnny did an awesome job in this section. Hey, John, this could improve a little bit. And they send it to them, and that way they can watch their own recording, but also get the feedback from their leader on what they're doing really well and what they could improve on.
That's funny. My daughter, her volleyball coach, we were talking about before we started. I don't even know what that. I don't know if it's huddle, ball time, something like that. But he'll do that. He can clip things, write notes, do a little voiceover, saying, "Hey, look where you're out of position here." So that's good. Final one was marketing related, a little also.
Yeah. So the final one is actually one of my favorites out of the whole deal, and it's that the marketing director does not have to be someone with a marketing background. And what we saw with them is they'd kind of been struggling to have a long-term marketing director really lead the marketing at the level they need to drive first appointments. And one of the biggest things, we've seen a lot of advisors go out and hire kind of that shiny object of someone with like digital marketing background to be their lead marketing director. And I go back to the story of, Matt at World Series of Sales, one of our top producers, who's in 16 markets now. And he shared something that stuck with me that, hey, I don't do anything fancy or special. I do the same stuff you all do. I just do more of it. And that's what Ivan, Andrew and Grant's marketing director, that's what he's doing. So he is a process and data-driven guy, actually a CPA by background. And all he does is track the numbers. They eliminate marketing funnels that don't have great results and focus on the ones that are direct response that have great results. And kind of proof in the pudding that this year, their appointment setting rate from their events in 2025 are actually up 20% over 2024. And then the other key thing that I really saw with him is that he is not afraid to go to a vendor and ask for more value from that vendor. And when you're spending $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year at a marketing vendor, that's what I would encourage people to. Don't be afraid to do that. And Ivan does a great job of it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Great ones. All right, third, Matt, you're up. So you got to go to Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Milwaukee, it wasn't Fort Lauderdale.
Home of Larry Templeton, which that's a Chris Farley inside joke. Maybe someone will get it on the podcast.
Over
but
my head.
no.
Me too.
Yeah.
But you spent some time with Tony, someone that you've helped recruit here to AE and had a long-term relationship with. And I think he's one of those that we talk about being just a student of the game and has had just incredible growth. I think really last 2 years we've seen him just explode. So why don't you share some of the key takeaways you had from Tony's time?
I love Tony, and I think anybody who's spent time with Tony loves the man. You know, he's got a couple superpowers that we saw on display while we were there. So Tony has no issue being vulnerable and sharing a lot of himself with people, and he poured himself onto that stage with the people that are there. You could feel not only his head, but his heart, his emotion that he really gave into this thing. And he connects with people so tightly because he's willing to do that. There's also something beautiful about Tony in that he's seen lower lows than most of us with his background that he's willing to share. And so I think the higher highs, he has a better, deeper appreciation for. So you can, anybody who hasn't had a chance to get to know Tony, you should at our events. And it's interesting, he's only been with AE for 5 years. His name's got dropped around here a lot over 5 years, but he joined AE and I was working with him right at the beginning of 2020, like January of 2020. Talk about an interesting time to join AE. I don't have the exact amount of production that he was doing at that time, but it was $30 to $40 million. And when we're going to get to the end of this year, 2025, 5 years later, Tony has a chance to 10x that business. He's going to finish somewhere between $300 and $400 million this year, which I don't know if we've ever had a growth story at that level. It's pretty wild. It was great to see his office. There's some beautiful things that he was doing in his office. But Tony's superpowers of being vulnerable are one thing, and the other thing is he's an implementer. Right? He has no problem taking action on what he learned. So a couple of things that I took from Tony. I've got a few thoughts that hit me around his mindset, how he's achieved growth like that. He had a huge jump in spike in production from 2022 to 2023. That was his biggest year of growth. So he highlighted that transition. I can get a few of those points. And then really, we all love marketing. That room was asking and begging for more marketing. So he dug into a little bit more on his marketing tactics. So those were kind of the three things to dig into here. To go into the mindset piece of it with Tony and how he's able to achieve growth like that, he started off, the preface that he had inside of the whole event was, I'll give you the tactics. Don't worry about the tactics. I'll give you the tactics over the next day and a half, but that's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking yourself, how do I think about these problems? You should not be thinking, where do I download the form? He's like, you'll get the form, but you need to be asking yourself, is that the form I even need, right? Or how, is that a question that I should even be considering inside of my practice? So we challenged them just to make sure they were focused on the right thing. I thought this was interesting. He said this is how he grew a lot inside of AE and still approaches things, is that he takes a look at 10 to 15 offices that are either doing more production than him or that are above him on the leaderboard, or people that he chases after, 10 or 15 of those at all times. And the one question that he asks is, what commonalities do they have? And I thought that was super interesting. If anybody inside of AE would look at that next notch up, and that might be production, or it could be profitability, or it might be whatever, but what are the commonalities that they have? And once he was able to identify those, he said, stop fighting and start implementing. Like, we all have this negative self-talk, and he got into this a little bit about, their business is different, or Milwaukee is different than Fort Lauderdale, or whatever it might be, but that's head trash. He's like, if 10 or 15 other people around the United States are doing this inside of the AE model, there's no reason that I can't do it. So he'll write it down. He says that he gets the head trash out of his head by writing it down, and that allows him to implement and go forward with it. Gave some credit to Dan Sullivan and 10X Thinking. A lot of his stuff of which of these should we be thinking about was, if our business scales 10X bigger than it is today, how does that impact this choice that I'm making today? So don't think about doubling, think about 10Xing, and does this scale with it? And maybe the last part to wrap up the first thing around mindset that he left people with, and this is credit to the AE community, because Tony, a couple of years into AE, got to know Joel Johnson really well, and Joel's influenced a lot of people's lives around here. They had built up some rapport, so Joel could give him this kind of ribbing. But Joel was teaching him something. Tony came back and said, well, what about this? Or why don't I do it this way? And Joel just, pretty bluntly, but in a joking way said, how about
kind of like Joel does?
Yeah,
Usually.
He said, how about when you surpass my production, why don't you change it then? Right? And so it was just, again, it kind of cemented in with Tony's like, okay, that's a commonality. I should just stop fighting it and I should just implement. So I think he did a really nice job of setting things up in there.
Yeah. What'll be interesting is that commonality thing's great. And I'll probably hit a few of them at the end, just that I've seen even just in those 5 offices, right, as we compared them. So that's good advice for anyone. So
absolutely.
Talk a little bit about, I know this was a topic at all of them, I think, as people were seeing a drop off from setting appointments at the seminar to those appointments showing up for the first appointment.
Yes.
I think we all came back and said, everyone was talking about they're seeing that right now. And I think there's probably some reasons for that. But I know that was a topic there, and he hit some of the things they've done that they've kind of had the opposite trend there, which I think is a cool thing.
Yep. A lot to learn from it. So to set this up, I'm going to give everybody some stats that Tony doesn't mind me sharing. And this blew my mind. And this is going to that 2022 to 2023 transformation and what they did in their business to improve those ratios. So in 2022, Tony's team spent $785,000 in marketing. That was their marketing budget, pretty solid spend. And at the end of the day, when it was all said and done and you got to his bottom level of profit, Tony that year profited $300,000. That's, there's a lot of Keith Cunninghams that we could throw in there about, or a lot of, definition of insanity, but it was obviously frustrating. You fast forward a year later in 2023, their marketing budget was almost identical. It was $800,000. The year before it was $785,000. So this year's $800,000. They moved their profit from $300,000 to $3.3 million. It was an 11x profit on the same.
That's much better.
Yeah.
Good job, Tony.
A lot bigger. And the two reasons, Cody, to directly answer your question, their seminar booking ratio went up and their closing ratio, or they call it their helping ratio, went up. And so I'll cover what Tony talked about there. I don't know if there's going to be anything that's groundbreaking. I think it cements ideas and concepts that everybody's had around here for a long time. Their seminar booking ratio that year went from 42% to 72%. That's a huge growth. Their primary change was their personal story. It was not just hearing Bo Eason one time and saying, that's a good idea, I should share a story. Or not just getting into Pat Quinn stuff that's on the DVR and listening to it one time. It was really, really committing to it. Hiring personal coaches in there, even to the point of Tony's working with personal coaches before he goes onto our stage to hear his personal stories, to hear how he's crafting the presentation, like really, really committing to this. And so, again, his primary change was his opening story, working with getting very vulnerable and sharing that opening story, and then 1 or 2 other times sharing stories in there. And he swears that was the biggest change inside of their office of going from 42% to 72%.
Well, it is amazing when you think about it being such a big funnel that a lot of people do just go through the motion, right? Or you've done it for so long. So.
Yep.
Hey, Cody, I might throw one quick from Rob Russell's Curve. Rob's partner and lead sales guy there did talk about the fall off ratio between seminars and first appointments specifically.
Yep.
And the challenge there, one of his core things was, and it's kind of interesting, I've been reading a lot lately about how to increase marketing, and the word personalization tends to come up a lot. And one of the things Curve said that has made a huge difference for their business is they'd put every kind of email drip and text drip and all these things in place. He said, well, I made a big change that made a big difference. Friday from 4 to 5, I block my calendar, and every single first appointment gets a personal phone call from me. And it's changed the dynamic, the ratio significantly in the business. Curve was unable to give me an exact stat, so I don't want to quote one, but he goes, it was game changer in the results. And then it was nice that we had Sharice McKenzie in our group, and she immediately threw in and goes, yeah, I do that too, and I don't have any problems with my ratios. It's kind of neat how the community comes together, but strategically, maybe an old school way from 4 to 5 o'clock on Friday could make a big difference for some advisors.
Yeah, it was funny because even at ours, that conversation started going, and I asked a question at one of the tables. I'm like, who do you have making these calls? And almost to a person, it was like one of their newest, most inexperienced people making those calls. And I'm like, there's not a more important thing than someone showing up for that first appointment in your office, right? And you have a brand new person who's maybe front desk receptionist making those reminder calls. Like, it was funny. We didn't quite get to that, like 4 to 5 time block at the lead advisor, but kind of got there to like, who are your best people, either on the phone, in person, sales, making making those calls. So any other, I know you said some other just kind of marketing things
Yeah,
that they,
well,
they
I
tweak
do
too.
want to hit on again how Tony approaches his seminar and his appointment process. Every advisor has different topics that they hit on inside of their seminar and their appointment process. Tony has 5 things. They're hitting on legacy, income, investments, healthcare, and tax. They call them something different. They have their own, branded sales process. One thing that I thought was interesting, though, is they're going through those sections at the seminar. And at the seminar, they're asking people to self-assess where they are in those areas. And one takeaway, it was a quick little takeaway, but a lot of people said that they're going to start using it after it, is as they're going through the self-assessment, Tony would say, I need you to score yourself 1 to 10, no 7s. And that got repeated over and over, 1 to 10, no 7s. Tony would say that most people, if they don't know, will just rate themselves a 7, and I can't do anything with a 7. A 7's a fence sitter. It's saying like, I guess I'm okay, but I don't really need to address it. He said, clearly, if you're an 8, 9, 10, you're probably pretty good. We might not need to address it. If you're a 1 to 6, what he would say is that if you mark yourself a 1 to 6 in any of these categories, it might make sense to meet with us. So I think almost everybody in that room was taking away 1 to 10, no 7s. Then when they get into the sales process, as those people come through, they're simply looking at which of those people or which of those areas the people had a 1 to 6 in, and then they're diving deeper about, like we've heard, tell me more, and how long has this been a concern, and what has your current advisor done about it? And did that work? And if you continue to do nothing, what's that net effect going to be? So they have 5 key areas that they hit on at the seminar, and then they get into those 5 levels of depth once they come into the office. And I think Tony would tell you that getting people to self-assess where they're at the seminar has led to a high stick ratio of them coming into the office. Yeah.
Man, it's really interesting to hear that, because one of the key things that I almost put on my list that advisors love was Grant went through the exact same thing on his seminar appointment setting sheet and went through really detailed on how to self-assess yourself. Had the same scale, 1 out of 10 with no 7s. So I think that's a key thing that both those guys had. And Grant and Andrew both increased their stick ratio a ton off seminars last year.
Awesome. And then, there were a couple other just marketing things. Again, our crowd had a high appetite for marketing. So it's funny, Jake, that you mentioned the Matt Dickin in 16 different markets. I don't do anything different than you. I just do more of it. Tony hit on that over and over. I think he said that was his largest takeaway from the World Series panel, that they don't do anything that's magical inside of their marketing. They're just going to get really good at it and do more of it. His 3 biggest marketing things or marketing successes that he gave to the crowd, though, the number 1 was naming the process and the deliverable. I think we've all heard that forever. For them, it's the retirement ready roadmap. But as he talked about the coaching that he received with us in the first couple of years, he fought that for a while. He said, it sounds dumb, it sounds kitschy, I don't know what difference it's going to make. And then as soon as they did it and they started repeating it over and over, people started calling in and saying, like, I don't have a retirement ready roadmap. How do I get one of those? And so I think hopefully most of the people who've tuned to this have one of those, but if not, he said that was a fundamental first step. A second step was having one consolidated offer on all of his marketing channels. So some people started to call this a toolkit, but instead of having a white paper on this and a free report on that and another software analysis on this, having one deliverable that he was giving away on all of their channels. That would be the offer on their radio or their TV or their social channels. So one consolidated offer. So that's a variable that they didn't have to play with. That could be a consistent inside of their marketing. And then the last thing that Tony hit on just around some marketing magic was a commitment to outbound callers. We've talked about this with list marketing and post-COVID and people having dedicated callers inside of their office. Tony would tell you that if you commit to having outbound callers in your firm, it will become your number 1 marketing ROI channel. That he hasn't met with anybody that has dedicated outbound callers that does not say it's their number 1 ROI funnel. He has 2 outbound callers in their office when we went through there in Milwaukee. Each one of them averages 140 new appointments per month. Now, part of that is all of their incoming leads do come to those people, and they're putting them on the calendar. But when they have open space and they have plenty of open time and open space, they're calling back into the list. And so their job is to drum up more appointments. Their KPI, to give everybody a little bit of tactics on this, is 80 outbound calls a day is what his expectation is for those 2 outbound callers. And he swears that it's Better to have two than one, that it sets up a really healthy competition. They do fun things back and forth. They've got a WWF belt that they carry, and they get to keep it at their desk, or one has to give it to the other. But we talked for quite a while inside of there about a commitment to outbound calling from somebody in the firm, somebody dedicated to doing that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's some good ones.
For sure.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. I got in the game too, which this is going to be weird as the host actually sharing. But I was able to attend too. So Ryan and Tyson in Salt Lake City. And then I went and saw the Beacon crew. So Pete, John, Dan, and Ben, who's their kind of president now, or president or COO, shared a bunch there too. So got to see them in Nashville. So good ones too. It's interesting, and I said this earlier, but this whole idea of success leaves clues. I don't think Jake said it, and I don't think you said it, but I'm 99% sure Grant and Andrew just moved into a new office within the last 2 years or so.
18 months, yeah.
And Tony, same thing, just moved into a new one. One of the things that we saw there is like both of those advisors I visited just have great offices too, right? I say when someone's going to trust you with their life savings, they want something that feels a little more permanent. So just to reiterate one we talk about all the time, but a couple other that I saw that I just I know are really, really big for your advisors that you saw too, but they were huge talking points in mine. And so I'm going to kind of combine both of these a little, but Ryan and Tyson talked about it a ton. Pete and John talked about it a ton, is that when they got more intentional about creating time in their schedule to think about the business just took off to the point now where Ryan and Tyson spend 2 to 3 days a week thinking about the business, where they don't have anything on their calendar. They have stuff they're reading. They get together for a couple hours to talk about things that they're doing. And they showed actually a chart that the more time they spend have freed up. So like when they first started, I think it was like an hour or two a week they would spend right on a Monday for an hour or two, just like thinking about the business. Listening to podcasts, stuff like that. So I know that's a big thing for all of those. So that was something that they all had in common. And then the other one that just hit me is because I know your three advisors really well too. Both of them talked about the value of like a scaling up. One of them was using scaling up. I think one was using EOS. I think kind of a mix with Rob and Tony and Grant and Andrew too, but almost all of them have a system in place. I think all 5 of the ones we've seen have a system in place. I know we've launched the scaling up coaches here that are working with a lot of our advisors. I know we're working with Rodney, worked with Tony for some years, helping him there too. So that structure, I think, was one of those other things when you think about success leaves clues. But then a couple specific ones for me that jumped out with Beacon in Nashville. I would probably define it as they know who they are and they know what's important to them, and they communicate that through everything they do. So, probably tying it back a little bit to like core values. They had it was probably 6 or 7 core values. In those core values, everything they do in the business is driven around those. From one, they're on the main walls. You walk through their office, so they have them all up on the wall. And theirs are kind of built around some biblical principles that are really, really important to them. And we talked about that. They even said it. They're like, those don't have to be important to you. They're important to us. What's important is that you understand what your core values are and that you build everything around it. And you could just see it like in the people they hire. Like those core values are represented in the people that they hire. One of the things that I thought was really great, actually, I stole it. We're implementing it. So you guys don't even know this, but you'll see it at the end of the year, a holiday party we do. But each year they have their team members vote on the team member that best represented one of those core values throughout the year. And then they have like an annual winner of like the person who best represented them. So it's not just that they had them, it's that you're seeing them like in everything that they do, right? It's a big part of their culture in their office. They talked about a program they have. It was called PAK, P-A-K, which was personalized acts of kindness, kind of like our MAD program, right? So they have, basically it's like they have a client who got diagnosed with cancer, employees are reaching out, sending them like really thoughtful, meaningful, personalized like gift. I hate to say gifts, but yeah, like a gift thing. Something they do that's a little bit different. They actually, but again, we know this, we talk about it all the time. what you reward gets done, and so they actually pay employees for those personalized acts of kindness. So every time they do one, I think they give them a $50 bonus or something like that. So they were just showing, I mean, letters and thank yous from people that had gotten some of these. So, but tied back in so much to their culture, and they even when they talk about the program, they talk about how it fulfills this core value of what is really, really important to them. So those were a few things that I thought were cool, and then. One simple thing that Pete said has just been a game changer, and ironically, Dave and I were on a call with Grant and Andrew like a couple hours before we recorded this, and we're kind of talking about something similar. But Pete and Jenny actually host every month a dinner with the founder. And so they have their advisors nominate one of their favorite clients, and they usually invite 6 to 8 couples over. And Pete and Jenny hosted dinner at their home, and it's more of a personal time, ask them what they're doing well, what they can improve, just get to know their top clients. And I think the point of all that, it's super cool for those clients. Not many financial advisors probably doing that, but Pete said the amount of referrals that they've got from those clients when they do those dinners is just incredible. So those were some that I thought were just really, really cool takeaways there. And then I'll switch to Thacker's unless you guys, did I clarify those well? Just, okay, no questions around those. Thacker's, if I were going to say the takeaway, and Dave, it's funny you mentioned Raising Cane's, because that's kind of where my head goes with Ryan and Tyson. What they said is simplicity scales. And if you want to build something big, you've got to simplify it. And I think they looked, at their business in a lot of different ways. So some things they talked about is like the number one metric they track. And again, some of this goes back to language, right? It's not how many assets do we gather, how much revenue did we generate, how much profitability. They said, now you definitely want to have goals around those, right? And we do. We have goals around those. But when we're talking to our team, our number one metric we talk about is how many families did we help? Mm-hmm. And that's just like their big, big takeaway is like we want our entire team focused on not revenue we're generating or how much AUM we gathered or annuities, but really focus on how many families did we serve and how many families did we help. And so they pay attention to that. They even talked about the idea of like every week they get a KPI dashboard, but they're like, what we realized is we had it overcomplicated, so we simplified it down to here's the 5 things that we care about, right? First appointment, stick ratio was a big one, right? But these are the things that really matter. They're like, what we found is half the things we were looking at, we really weren't even paying attention to. So there's just focus. Again, going back to the whole idea of simplicity scales. Another example of that, all of their marketing is around Social Security and helping you make wise decisions when you select your Social Security payments. And they kind of back to maybe what Tony was saying, people push back. People are like, well, don't you get a lot of unqualified people or people don't have a whole lot of assets? And Ryan said, yeah, a ton. He said, in fact, last year, these numbers aren't exact, but he said last year we generated 4,800 new leads, or I don't even remember, maybe converted into actual like a first appointment. And he said only 400 of those, a little over roughly 400 became a client. But he's like, you know what? There were 4,400 people that we helped make a wise decision around their Social Security. And it took us 10 minutes to help them make the best choice that was going to maximize it for them, right? So he's like, we see it as a way that we can serve people that maybe they don't have enough assets, but it's an easy way for us to help other people. But they said it's the highest response rate. We don't have to have 18 different, going back to what we're talking about, simplicity scales, we don't have to have 18 different marketing drip funnels to where, oh, this one's the tax. We got to send them the tax kit. Everything's around this. Now, we talk about all those other things in the planning, but all our marketing's around that. So I think to your point on Grant and Andrew, too, they said we really did a deep dive into pruning our marketing, what was working, what wasn't, and just realized we could put a bunch of money to the bottom line by cutting out things that just weren't working, that maybe we did them at one time. He's like, some of it may have been vanity or ego or other reasons, but just realize it's not serving us and doing anything to do that. So, and then I think the other big takeaway from them was, and they said this really well, and you guys have heard them say it, they're like, we'll see some of these advisors move to other markets and open offices, and they're like, we thought about that. We could move to Phoenix and Vegas and Reno and these different places, but they're like, we hadn't tapped out Salt Lake City. And so what they've done instead is, I think now they have 7 offices. Every office looks exactly the same. They even talked about, we want it right off the freeway. It's got to be ground floor of this type of building. Talked about how they design them all the same, right? It has the same color blue in every office. But what they said is, when you talk about simplicity, multiple cities complicates things. One city where we can bring everyone together and everything's working well, that's a lot easier. Simplicity is one of those things that scales. So I think for any advisor, just, Ryan and Tyson have been our number one advisors for what now, probably 3 or 4 years in a row. Yeah. And actually have probably run some things much more simpler than a lot of our advisors do, but it is, back to the Raising Cane theory, do a few things and do them really, really, really well. That's really a key there. So those were, some of the things that I think I would say. And that maximize your own city before you move on is a big one. And they did ask a question too, or they proposed a question. This was like one of their thinking time questions that they said's been one of their most powerful. But they said, if your business could talk, what would it say are the 3 biggest challenges that it's facing? And they're like, if you really ponder that question and think about it and then go about solving those, or that was one of the big ones there. So I know it's a little different type of podcast. We're going to be doing some more of these, but as we wrap up, I went around maybe just in a sentence or a question, what was if there were one takeaway or maybe one question you would have the people that listen to this ponder from your time with Tony, how would you summarize it?
Constant forward progress would probably be my thesis if I walked out of there.
Yeah.
Or again, he said, stop fighting, start implementing. So there was a big challenge of what is different about your business today that wasn't there at the beginning of the year, right? There should never be a time you feel like you're treading water. There are so many opportunities that we have inside of the AE network that you always need to be moving forward. So again, I said before, one of his superpowers is implementation. He's implemented stronger and quicker than most of the people inside of AE, maybe anybody that I know, so constant forward motion.
Cool. Yeah. I'll say mine, then I'll bounce around to you guys. But with Beacon, I would say for sure it was, have you went through a process to identify your core values, but then have you made sure that they're integrated into everything you're doing, right? Are they well known to the people on your team? Are they displayed? Do you really know what those are? And just being true to who you are, I think, and building your business around that, and not being kind of unapologetic about those things, I think were really, really important. And then Ryan and Tyson's, they're probably a lot. Simplicity scales would obviously be an easy one, but I do think they just hammered home over and over again how important carving out some time during the week to think about your business is. And if there were an easy takeaway for anyone, if you just started with an hour a week, maybe it's you go to lunch by yourself, or if you have a business partner, that's great, and just spend some time thinking about your business. They even recommended, we all know Keith Cunningham, they're like, if you need some place to start, just buy his book, The Road Less Stupid. At the end of every chapter, he gives you thinking time questions, right? And he's like, Tyson said, Ryan and I have went through that book 3 times. Just take this chapter this week. This is what we're going to think about. So spend some time thinking about your business. Jacob, what would you say, Grant and Andrews, big key takeaway?
The big key takeaway or overall theme, I think I would sum up in, focusing on the details for their team. And going to the feedback to the advisors that were in the room, the number one feedback they had was they loved their Mega Mondays and how they're training their sales team. And I thought about it more as a question that I would ask myself if I was an advisor. And the question I would ask myself is, do I have a large amount of very consistent time that I'm meeting with my sales team to provide accountability, provide training, and provide growth? And if you can answer yes to that, that is a great equation to grow a great sales team.
That's cool. Dave, you started us with a great Raising Cane story. You got something good to take us home here?
We'll see how I do. I tell you what, I've been thinking a lot about exercises, and I've spoke a lot about this. I think in business too often you can have a thinking time question, but the question becomes for me is, what kind of exercises can you do with your team? Because it brings people around a table, around a powerful question. Sometimes independent thinking is powerful, but also group thinking can be powerful. And I shared that with the group. It's a little bit of where I started. But I think the exercise from Rob Russell's event was this. What one area if you elevated every aspect of it, could create the most growth before the end of the year. The areas were really simple for Rob's aspect: office environment, seminar experience, client communication, prospect communication, client segmentation, sales process, or client events. But don't attack them all.
Pick one.
Pick one. Is it Arms Day? You gonna get the gun show going? If that's what you're gonna do, fine. It may be sales process for you. Make that your bicep and go to work and tear it up. I mean, you got to do a lot of exercise. We're not talking about one little thing. We're talking about digging in and figuring out those 5, 6, 7, so that you know what? It may hurt for the next 5 days. It may hurt for the next 2 weeks as you make these changes in your business, but long term, you'll be stronger and better for it.
That's great. Gentlemen, appreciate the time today, and hopefully people enjoy this. Well, like I said, we'll be doing some more of these. I know the A Exchange events were great for the advisors, having them in that smaller setting with 40 or 50 advisors, where not only were they learning from another very successful advisor, but definitely able to share with each other. I think one of our core values here has always been surrounding ourselves with successful people. It's key to, I know, not only our growth, but the growth of advisors here. So love that we get to do this every day. So, hey, remember, the world needs great leaders today more than ever. So let's go be great.